Speaker. I want to also recognise and support this motion. It is something which my whole life as a young person I have wondered why Australia hasn't done this before, and it is long past time to recognise the millions of people who were murdered in a program of ethnic and religious erasure. It was a program that was systematically and carried out in an organised fashion across around 8 years. And it started and continued with the deliberate intent to eliminate all Armenian people, and it was described as to be a final solution. And I think it's important to understand that this was a systematic and organised process. I won't describe the details that other people have talked about, but I think it's worth reading into the record what was done and what was done in advance by members of the Ottoman Turks, the Ittihad Central Committee that was in charge at the time in 1915. A member of the committee on the 2nd of February advised the German ambassador that the war is the only propitious moment to conclude the Armenian question. And that was at the time where there was a slow and continuous build-up of murders, rapes, public hangings, the incarceration of intellectuals, particularly of Armenian leaders. Massacres and stealing and looting of property was commonplace throughout this early period. And it was in April of 1915 that the famous monastery of Zaytun was burned by the Turks, and it was one of just like so many attacks and attempts to obliterate Orthodox Christian culture and community, and to purposely try and affect the spirit of the Armenian people. It didn't work, but it was carried out extensively. It was by May in 1915 that the New York Times reported that the Young Turks had adopted a policy to annihilate the Armenians. I apologise. And in June that year, another member of the Ittihad Central Committee, Enver, issued an announcement that they would give the Armenians a new and final residence, and it was in June that they dispatched directions concerning forced deportations, where Armenians were deported to the Syrian desert, and in mass numbers they were left there to starve and without water. This was such a regular number of deportations that they had to, by June the same year in 1915, advised the precaution of separating the convoys of Armenian deportees by a distance of 5 hours. We can only imagine how many people. These were massacres also of Armenian Christians, Maronites, Nestorians, Europeans, Catholics and other non-Muslim people that occurred throughout that time. It was Ambassador Henry Morgenthau who reported in August that the committee had told him that they'd carefully considered in all its details the matter of crushing the Armenians, and that the policy which was being pursued was that which had been officially adopted. He also told Morgenthau that the deportations were not the result of hasty decisions, but of careful and prolonged deliberation. that 3/4 of the Armenians had already been disposed of. Mr. Speaker, this was a systematic plan to annihilate the Armenian population, and it nearly worked, but it didn't. And it's incredibly important, as others have said, to recognise the lessons of history and to understand that our silence is effectively a denial of the reality of what happened. It diminishes responsibility. It also doesn't recognise the harm and suffering that has occurred for the children, the grandchildren, the survivors of people who were murdered throughout that period, who have had to live with the silence where this genocide has not been internationally recognised. It's important for all of us to commit to correct the historical record if it is ever not correct, and to learn the lessons of history, and to always stand and call out fascism and authoritarianism and hate crimes in all their forms. And it was something that was used, the silence of the Armenian genocide was used, as Mr. Broad said. But I'll read out the detail that is in the Armenian National Institute, and if anyone wants to understand the reality of what happens, they just need to look at the Armenian National Institute, which is in the United States, and it has developed a chronology of what is known with the day-by-day evidence and reports of atrocities and horrific acts that occurred. And on August 2022, the last part of the chronology that has been collected was from 1939, and it was from Adolf Hitler, who was addressing his military commanders a week before the invasion of Poland and the start of World War II. And Adolf Hitler spoke then of his orders to kill without mercy or pity all men, women and children of Polish race or language. And he concluded his remarks by saying, "Who still talks nowadays of the extermination of the Armenians?" So, Mr. Speaker, I want to respect and thank very much the people who have travelled here. It's really important to be able to speak publicly and have it on the record of the Tasmanian Parliament, recognition of the pain and suffering that has occurred for people in the absence of this public recognition. It doesn't remove that pain and suffering, but it is an essential part of the process of healing, along with our commitment to always collectively stand against all forms of hate.